The timekeeper's watch. Ethan always had a knack for finding odd things at flea markets, old coins, strange trinkets and faded maps that whispered stories of adventure. But the watch? That was different. It was tucked away in a dusty corner of a stall, its brass casing glinting faintly in the sunlight. The vendor, an elderly man with a raspy voice, handed it to him with a crooked smile. "It's not for everyone," he said. Ethan laughed. "What does that even mean?" The man's smile faded. "Just be careful how you use it." Ethan paid the few bucks, chalking up the warning to the guy trying to add some mystery to his junk. But when he got home and examined the watch, he realized it wasn't junk at all. The face was intricate, with swirling etchings that seemed to shift as he tilted it in the light. There were 3 dials, hours, minutes, and one he couldn't place. It wasn't labelled. But what really caught his attention was the small inscription on the back. "For those who dare to alter time." Intrigued, Ethan set the watch to his current time and slipped it into his pocket. He thought nothing of it until later that evening, when he missed the bus home. Frustrated, he pulled out the watch and turned the mysterious 3rd dial, hoping it would do something. The world blurred for a moment. Ethan blinked, and suddenly the bus was there, idling in front of him as though it had never left. His jaw dropped. Had he imagined missing it? He climbed aboard, glancing nervously at the watch. That night, curiosity got the better of him. He turned the 3rd dial again, this time with more intention. The room around him shimmered, and when it solidified, he was back in his childhood bedroom. His younger self sat cross-legged on the floor, playing with toys Ethan had long forgotten about. It wasn't a memory. It was real. Panicked, Ethan turned the dial again, and in an instant, he was back in his apartment. His breathing was shallow, his heart racing. "This can't be real," he muttered. But the possibilities tugged at his mind. Over the next few days, he tested the watch. He went back to the day he had lost a soccer game and corrected a mistake, scoring the winning goal instead. He rewound time to ace a job interview he had initially bombed. Each success felt exhilarating. But the watch came with a cost. The more Ethan used it, the heavier it felt in his pocket. The brass began to tarnish, the once smooth dials sticking when he turned them. And then, the nightmares started. In his dreams, he was surrounded by shadowy figures, blurred versions of himself. Some were crying, others screaming. One leaned close, whispering, "You're unraveling us." Ethan tried to ignore it, but the nightmares grew worse. He began to notice strange inconsistencies in his life. Friends who remembered events he didn't, strangers who seemed to recognize him. His reflection in the mirror flickered, as though it wasn't entirely his own. The final straw came when he tried to fix his biggest regret, the day his best friend, Lucas, had died in a car accident. Ethan turned the watch, rewinding to the morning of the crash. He warned Lucas, convincing him to stay home. And for a moment it worked. Lucas lived. But when Ethan returned to the present, the world felt wrong. The sky was a shade darker, the air heavier. People around him acted strangely, their movements jerky, their voices distorted. And Lucas? He wasn't the same. He stared at Ethan with hollow eyes, his voice monotone. "You shouldn't have done this," Lucas said. "You don't understand what you've broken." The watch, now blackened and cracked, burned hot in Ethan's pocket. Panicked, he tried to turn the dials, but they wouldn't budge. The shadows from his nightmares began to seep into the room, their voices echoing in his ears. "Return it," they whispered, or lose yourself. Ethan's hands trembled as he flung the watch onto the table. The shadows coiled around it, pulling it into the darkness. As the watch disappeared, the world seemed to reset itself, the colours and sounds returning to normal. Ethan was left standing alone in his apartment, the weight of what he'd done pressing down on him. The watch was gone, but the memories remained. And every now and then, when he passed a clock or heard the tick of a second hand, he swore he could hear faint whispers. For those who dare to alter time,